Taylor's the brain, the expert, the guy. Maddie's got jokes and a wild ride. 30 minutes, no time to spare. Stack your lineup, win anywhere. SuperCoach Halfa. Get your edge, get it faster. Taylor leads, Maddie's laughter. NFL SuperCoach Halfa.
Thanks for joining me. I'm Maddie C, and welcome to my brand new annual event, the Fantasy Draft Doctrine. This is not going to be a short thing. I'm going to get into the weeds a bit, and the design here is not for me to tell you how to draft your team. That's up to you. But it is to share some information and ideas to help you make decisions that you're happy with for building your team. Because, I've played fantasy for 20 years, and I think the most unsatisfying thing you can do in fantasy is listen to some analysts and go and pick players that you've heard sound like they should have a really good year. And then if you're not winning and you've got a team full of people who you may not have otherwise picked, now you kind of got both. It's being unsuccessful with players you don't love. So if you're going to lose with players you love. And if you're going to win, even better if you can do it with players you had your flag planted on. Mate, you can find everything that we've been doing through the preseason here with Substack articles from the Aussie Gridiron Network, because that's where this is found. The Fantasy Day Doctrine is online for you to refer to all the time. Of course, you can also just download this podcast and keep a little eye on the transcript for little chapters on where I dive into each of the topics. There is quite a lot of topics in this one. But all of our writings from the preseason can be found on our Substack. Just hit their website there, Substack, and then search Aussie Gridiron Network. Subscribe for free. It will cost you nothing, and you'll get all the great content that I've been providing for the preseason with fantasy, but also all the great NFL analysis from the other guys in the network, including Manjot Melly and the guys from G'day Gridiron. It's all free, cost you nothing, and will give you a great edge in fantasy and give you an Aussie perspective on what's going on in the NFL. Time to strap in, because this is going to be a heck of a ride for my first ever Fantasy Draft Doctrine. Look out. This thing is like 9,000 words. It fills almost 30 pages in a Word document. So hang in there. This is the longest thing I've ever written. If you were an English teacher of mine in the past during high school, I've finally done it. I finally did something noteworthy with words. So we'll give this a go.
And now SuperCoach Halfa. Get your edge, get it faster.
The 2026 Fantasy Draft Doctrine. It's proof, it's paths, and it's profit for the season ahead. Every fantasy draft room suffers from people with similar diseases. You'll have someone in your draft room who will fall in love with the name of a player. Just kind of got to have him. Someone else will fall in love with, that memory from last year where that player had a really good week or fortnight. You'll have that someone who talks themselves into a player having their third-year breakout because there was a training camp quote from some coordinator saying that they look explosive, and then that guy starts behaving like he's just found electricity. Then September arrives and the truth walks in the door wearing steel caps and starts kicking shins. Fantasy football is not about collecting good players. That's Pokemon. Fantasy football is about collecting good players who are in situations that allow them to become fantasy points. The distinction matters. Other things that matter are talent, obviously, volume, the offensive line, the quality of your quarterback. Coaching definitely matters. Taylor will tell you game script is hugely important, and I agree. The role a player has matters. And then, of course, touchdowns matter. And I think that one is still the slipperiest goblin of them all for us fantasy managers. But we still get ourselves into trouble when fantasy managers do this thing. They'll isolate one thing and then kind of pretend it answers all the questions. Oh, this bloke's such a good player. Yeah, cool, but in what style of offense? Oh, mate, this team has got a great coach. Cool, but what does he actually improve? This fella is an elite talent. Yeah, but how many touches is he getting? Mate, that team has got a great O-line. Well, cool. Are they stronger at pass blocking or run blocking? This player's going to have a great new role. Yeah, cool, but is the role worth points, or is this just hope wearing a fake mustache? This is the 2026 Draft Doctrine. It's not a rankings article. We're not going complete player by player here. This is not some polite review designed to offend nobody and congratulate others for trying. This is the filter. The purpose is simple. I'm looking to separate proof from hype. I'm looking to show you paths instead of people relying on just vibes, man. And then I'm also looking to identify profit, where your pick gives you better production than what it costs you, rather than stumping up for a brand name player and then finding out he isn't worth it. We are looking at what mattered in 2025's fantasy season, how that could shape the 2026 fantasy season, where coaching changes carry numbers, what offensive line ratings can tell us, which players are kind of being underrated and which players are being overdrafted, and also importantly, how to build a draft board that won't collapse the second that somebody posts a camp clip with slow, dramatic music doing something kind of cool once in front of practice squad players who are not going to have an NFL job in September. No blind hope. No, oh, he's on the best shape of his life kind of nonsense from your boy Maddie C. We're not paying champagne prices for cordial here. No drafting a bloke because your brain remembers that awesome week they had in week 7, but deleted the 11 crappy performances. This is going to be an annual document that brings just the proof and maybe a few elbows along the way. My first chapter is dedicated to the rushing quarterback. That they are not a luxury anymore. They're the cheat code. And I think it's a great place to start because this is the position where fantasy managers still find new and creative ways to overcomplicate the bleeding obvious. Quarterbacks who run are different. They're not a little more useful. They're not kind of nice to have. They're different. Structurally different. They're not playing with the same scoring system that pure pocket passers have to, because they can get points through a second door, and sometimes that door is not locked or guarded. In most fantasy scoring systems, your passer will score a point for every 25 yards, but you get a point for every 10 yards of rushing. That's 2.5 times as efficient. And then passing touchdowns will score you 4 points, but that player, if they can rush a touchdown, will score 6. It's 1.5 times as efficient. This means that quarterbacks who, for instance, could scramble for 40 yards in a drive and rush in the touchdown have just produced the kind of scoring that a pocket passer needs multiple successful drives to manufacture. It's as a side hustle. This is a tax loophole. It's fantasy point laundering with a few extra grass stains. And Josh Allen does it better than all. Last season, through the fantasy relevant stretch, and we're not talking week 18 here. It is week 1 to 17, week 18. I'm dismissing that out of hand. It doesn't matter. Josh Allen gave you elite passing production, 3,600 yards. He added a whole rushing season on top, like he was doing a second job under a different ABN for a subsidiary of the same company. This year, the projection profile, it just rhymes with last year. Almost 4,000 passing yards, 26 passing touchdowns, 580 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns. He actually managed to score more in some of those categories last year. And this is why we have Josh Allen as the QB1 for 2026. It's not just because I like watching him throw linebackers into orbit, and let's be clear, I love that. It's because the maths screams like its hair's on fire. Passing production plus rushing touchdowns isn't just a fantasy profile. It is a weaponized spreadsheet. Allen is projected to sit almost 50 points clear of the next quarterback in one of the major projection sets. And to me, that's not, I like him a little bit more than the other guys. That's daylight between him and the rest. That's a positional chasm. Nay, a chasm. Thank you, Euros. It's someone bringing a flamethrower when all we're doing is having a candle lighting ceremony. But Josh Allen's not the whole story. This whole article's not about him. When you look at the shape of the quarterback board, this song is on repeat. Lamar Jackson projected for monster rushing production. Jaden Daniels projects to have more than 600 yards on the ground. Drake May, also projecting as a proper dual threat value. Jackson Dart projects with more than 500 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. Bo Nix is adding sneaky rushing usefulness, and Trevor Lawrence also brings ground game value, especially in the goal line situation. This is the picture of the modern quarterback board. The best fantasy quarterback profiles aren't always going to be the best pure passers. They're the ones who have more than one way to survive the weekend. A rushing quarterback can have that ugly passing day and still escape. But the pocket quarterback, man, you have an ugly passing day and you're staring at 7 points, wondering whether fantasy football is just self-imposed emotional vandalism. This is why Taylor especially has been aggressive on these rushing quarterbacks, and to me it makes sense. He's been strong on Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May. And you don't need to agree with every single of those slots to understand the thesis. If the quarterback can run, he just has an extra way to beat his average draft position, potentially the pick you use for him. And if he can run near the goal line, he's got a bonus way to smash up points. It's the part that people are still underpricing in this day and age. Rushing yards aren't extra anymore. They're stabilizers. Rushing touchdowns aren't just bonuses. They're bricks through fantasy windows. I like Jackson Dart. He's currently around about quarterback 9. And I think he's kind of one of the more polarizing ones. As a passer, there's, plenty to clean up. And I think this is the reason that we have him at 9. The passing profile isn't polished yet. There's going to be weekends where it looks like he's going to be trying to solve a Rubik's Cube in a house fire. But as a runner, that production demands your attention. His 2026 projection we just spoke about here is reflecting a really comfortable top 10 finish built on over 500 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. He cleared both of those thresholds last year in just 9 games. Food for thought. It's not a normal quarterback profile. It's chaos, but with a huge potential point total. Bo Nix is a kind of different bet, but I also like him. He's currently being drafted around about quarterback 15. He doesn't have Dart's obvious recklessness or Josh Allen's weekly demolition power, but he does have enough rushing usefulness and a brilliant line environment. There's no line. I don't know if you know this, but Denver project to be first in pass blocking and third in run blocking per Pro Football Focus. That matters. A young quarterback with rushing ability and a strong line and a system that can keep that offense on schedule. That's exactly the sort of pick that it looks really boring in July and August, but it's going to annoy everyone by November. And honestly, I love those picks. The draft room is like yawning, and I'm just taking the points. Drake May is a kind of cool example too of a next step bet. The projection profile here gives him 4,000 passing yards and 27 passing touchdowns. And that's kind of in the same numbers that Josh Allen's getting there. Some less rushing yards, but still 500 rushing yards and some touchdowns in that part of the game too. So it's not a little dual threat garnish next to your, chips and steak. It's a full fantasy meal, and we should be pricing it, and we should be expecting the output of kind of Josh Allen light there. If the passer structure too for him improves even slightly, and the addition of AJ Brown may help, he can probably climb into that tier that usually costs, far more than his current draft room reputation. Then there are the pocket passes. Now, spend a lot of time talking about the guys who can do 2. These are the guys who do 1. Joe Burrow, Matt Stafford, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. They can all have good fantasy seasons, and no one would pretend otherwise because we've seen it. Some of them over and over again. They need different things, though. They need passing volume. They need passing touchdowns. They need all of their receivers to be healthy. They need their pocket to be clean. They need the game script to behave. And they also sort of need the football gods not to turn the lights off halfway through dinner, because they can win, but they're just less forgiving. And in fantasy, I think the ability for forgiveness is a little underrated too. The rushing quarterback can kind of trip over in the passing game a bit and still find you 18 points, but a pure pocket passer needs just everything to behave to give you that kind of return. And when it does, it's beautiful. When it doesn't, your matchups kind of suddenly face down in a puddle at a high-scoring position. So the 2026 rule is simple. It's not 2014, so we shouldn't be drafting our quarterbacks like it is. The scoring system has evolved. The athletes have evolved, but your draft room might not have. Punish them for that. My next chapter here, number 2, is about coaching changes. People need to stop chasing just the fact that there's newness in the coaching change. Chase the receipts. It's where fantasy managers get a bit silly. A coach will move teams and someone will say in the media, this offense is now going to be multiple. Or some beat reporter posts that a slot receiver is being used creatively in, third down and passing situations. Some fluff, right? And then that running back catches a swing pass in shorts on a, clip that goes viral, and suddenly the whole internet is acting like that coordinator has promised 80 receptions and a marching band. And I'm here to say, stop it. No, stop it. Put the training camp bong down. A coaching change will only matter when we can connect 3 things. I work in facilities management, and there's one really interesting triangular model like this, the fire triangle. If you haven't heard of it, fire needs heat, fuel, oxygen. If you take one of those 3 away, the whole triangle collapses. I'm looking at coaching changes in a similar way. What did this coach do before that was successful? Does the roster that they're inheriting have those things? And does this move create efficiency, volume, or a cleaner path to fantasy points? I need to see those things in the move. And that's a filter for me. It's not just a fresh start. It's not a coach saying, this guy will want to get him in space. Everyone wants to get in space. I think that sentence should be illegal. The cleanest coaching move to me that connects these 3 dots is when Clint Kubiak has left Seattle as the offensive coordinator and has gone to the Las Vegas Raiders. He arrives where he was attached to a high-functioning offense in his past life. Seattle was a top-end scoring environment. Sam Darnold threw for over 4,000 yards last year and 25 touchdowns. The offense gave fantasy managers real usable production from places that didn't feel super obvious in July and August. Now, Clint Kubiak gets Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers. Ashton Genty didn't have a very efficient season last year, but there's proof. There is some proof that this move is going to be beneficial. The workload was not theoretical. He handled the ball 266 times, and he had 73 targets as a rookie. He had 1,300 scrimmage yards, so horribly inefficient, and 10 combined touchdowns, also probably lower than we were expecting. Now that 2026 projection has leapt because we know that this coach brings that stability. 281 carries, 346 total touches by the time you include, we think he's going to have about 60 receptions, 1,600 total yards, and he just projects to be a top 6 running back with those very clear lines, paths, the opportunity for him to improve at something the coach has brought across and him being talented enough to fill that gap. This isn't they may use him. This offense has a centerpiece, and this new coach knows to feed him until the wheels squeal. The receiving role, I think, is a huge bit for me. If Ashton Genty was just a grinder in this rebuilding offense, fine. That would be useful, and I have an example of that later. But at this spot in the draft, that's overpriced. If he's the 3-down back that we expect in the Kubiak structure that we've seen, the ceiling changes. A back who can run, catch, is on the field in all situations, whether the game script's positive or negative, is not just a running back anymore. He's a weekly problem with calves the size of baby cows. It's a calf joke. I think Brock Bowers is equally as obvious, but the market also understands it. His 2026 projection sits around 135 targets, 98 receptions, 995 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That's tight end too. It's what it is. It's not tight end value. It's a positional hammer. And Kubiak, bringing structure to that running game, motion, play action, it offers access to easy throws over the middle, and Bowers will be the central nervous system of the passing game. We should all expect that. So the Raiders coaching note is not that the new coach might improve the offense. That's weak. It's beige analysis, kind of like what boat shoes are to fashion. The actual note is that a coach coming from a high-end offensive environment now lands with a projected top 6 running back and top 2 tight end. It's draftable. It's actionable. It's not smokescreen analysis, and it comes with numbers. I think Buffalo is a different coaching story, though. We know what Buffalo's like, and they bring in Pete Carmichael Jr., arriving as an offensive coordinator, but I don't think that means that we need to reinvent the Bills. Joe Brady is still central to that offensive identity in the team. And Josh Allen is still Josh Allen. This offense isn't broken and trying to find religion. This is a good offense that is still a good offense, just adding the experienced offensive mind. And that matters too, but differently. The fantasy case for the players that we expect big production from in the Bills still exists. It existed before. We're projecting that it will stay there. Allen, quarterback 1, all his points, yada, yada. James Cook, projected for 300 carries, 1,400 yards, then another 36 catches and 300 yards, 13 total touchdowns. Now, that's key. The coaching move does not need to create the value. It's just simply supporting the value that was already there. Allen remains the king because he's the Swiss Army knife. He does all these jobs at once. James Cook becomes hard to dismiss because the projected workload is no joke. He's been doing it back-to-back seasons already. Back with 300 carries in the Josh Allen offense. I mean, you don't really need to squint hard. It's a grown-up workload. It's not some nice little running back 2 energy. The blokes are walking into his fantasy office with his lunchbox and a tax file number ready to do hard work. Now, not every team's that simple. Washington, for instance, is more complicated. David Blau's promotion gives the Commanders continuity, but not the same clean, look at what an offense he just ran produced proof trail. So we've got to be careful. The hard number here is not the coordinator history. The hard numbers are going to come from Jaden Daniels, and we've seen them. He projects this year as quarterback 5, somewhere in the range of 3,900 passing yards, 22 touchdowns. I'm going to get a megaphone for this. 670 rushing yards. 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, that's fantastic production to put on top of all that passing yards and the passing touchdowns. It's exactly why a quarterback in that shape, the rushing quarterback, is so dangerous. And we've seen him have a season like that already as a rookie. Washington does not need to be a perfect ecosystem for Daniels to matter. His legs create points even when the structure gets messy. He can rescue a broken drive. He can rescue broken pockets. He can rescue broken dreams. He can turn a bad play into a 23-yard scramble while your opponent's muttering something about, it's all so unsustainable through his clenched teeth. But Jaden Daniels is the stronghold, and the rest of the Commanders, they're a different question. I require more discipline. One of the early 2026 snapshots that I read, when you rank all of the fantasy players available into a linear order, if you didn't have Jaden Daniels in there, there would be no top 50 player for Washington. I mean, Terry McLaurin's on the edge of it, 52. He's useful. He'll have 120 targets, 80 catches, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. And that's a real player. He's not promising you cartloads of gold, but there's some stability there. But what you got to know about the Commanders is this isn't Dallas. This isn't Cincinnati, Detroit, the LA Rams. The market expects multiple top-end players in those teams. The Washington rule is far simpler. Back Daniels because the rushing lets him beat the ecosystem, but be more careful with everyone else because they need the ecosystem to help them. I spent a lot of time listening to Taylor talk about the Chargers off mic, and we've shared a bit about his passion for the Chargers on mic as well. And that led me down a rabbit hole. I started thinking to myself, why is the fascination there? The Chargers were kind of vanilla last year. Turned out that bringing in Mike McDaniel might have helped the very specific problem that I uncovered about the Chargers. They could move the ball. They did it all year. They just couldn't always turn it into points, and that's a fantasy problem. They won some games, but they have low scorers. The yardage without the touchdowns is a very polite way to lose. It's the equivalent of driving all the way to the beach, then just sitting in your car and eating a warm banana. And I cannot stand bananas. McDaniel's best Miami offense was built on speed, taking those layup short passes when they were available, gives you yards after the catch, but also then those explosive plays over the top that we loved. This year, he's going to bring us an even cleaner version of the Justin Herbert we've seen in recent years, and this offense now becomes far more interesting because of that. Herbert has always had talent. He just needs easier answers and more cheap production, more receivers catching the ball with just a little room to do something with it instead of asking Herbert to play hero ball in a phone box week in, week out. It's going to matter for Herbert, but it's also going to matter for guys like Ladd McConkey, who was disappointing last year. It'll matter for Omari and Hampton, who look great. He suffered a bit of injury, but he looks like the real deal. It'll matter for those tight ends, and Oronde Gadsden has definitely been the shining light there in all the preseason analysis. It's going to matter for the whole scoring environment. And I'm not saying McDaniel fixes everything. It's kind of lazy. Miami had its own problems, but the Chargers are exactly the sort of team where coaching is going to turn that good yardage into better fantasy scoring, and we should all pay attention. Now, bring your hard hat. Cleveland is a construction zone. Todd Monken is arriving from Baltimore as the offensive coordinator, and to me, that is interesting because we've seen him attached to efficient, aggressive offense. But Cleveland is not Baltimore. The quarterback room has no Lamar Jacksons, and the ecosystem there is clearly a bit of a mess. The same early ranking snapshot ranking top players had 0 Cleveland players in the top 50. Quinshon Judkins was the highest rated Brown at 57. And yet, Judkins is exactly the kind of player I'm willing to go into bat for and fight about. Not because the offense is beautiful, it's definitely not. But the Browns offense might be the fantasy equivalent of just having like pineapple juice on your Wheat Bix. Pretty foul, but there's volume. And the volume is screaming. The 2026 projections, once I sort of pulled them all together and then averaged it out, put Judkins at around 316 carries, had some receiving in there, 350 total touches, 1,250 yards, a 74% share of the carries. That's enormous. That's not maybe he'll get some work. Hey, they may be ugly, but they're handing him a shovel. This is where fantasy managers need to learn the difference between something that's just ugly and what's a bad opportunity. Cleveland may be ugly. Judkins will still be useful because of that volume. If the rest of the room is too scared of the offense, Judkins becomes exactly the sort of value my running back love list was built on. Proof, workload, and discipline on not overpaying for it. Last thing I wanted to talk about here was the Giants. They're kind of a chaos bet with legs. John Harbaugh arrives as the coach and Matt Nagy comes across as the offensive coordinator. You can have whatever opinion you like about those names, but the fantasy shape is really clear. Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterboo become more interesting if this team becomes more functional, physical, and less allergic to coherent football. We've spoken about Jackson Dart and the path he's set to play in 2026, so I want to just turn the lens to Cam Scatterboo. He's projected to have around 60% of the backfield carries, but also a meaningful receiving game involvement. He's already showed scoring points per game is his jam. If the Giants give him that real role, with that stable structure that you expect Harbaugh and Nagy to bring, he doesn't need to become Christian McCaffrey, and you're certainly not paying for him like he is, but he becomes a weekly problem at a far cheaper price. Kind of why I'm happy to back Scatterboo. He's not the best back in football kind of argument. It's that his role, the price, and his path to points are all really clear. And that's, to me, where the fantasy profit lives. So the coaching rule is brutal but useful. Kubiak to Las Vegas brings production, evidence of that, elite young usage pieces. Buffalo's offensive room supports an already elite fantasy profile. Washington keeps Jaden Daniels interesting because his rushing just breaks the rules. McDaniel to the Chargers attacks that clear issue where they have the yards, they just couldn't convert it into points. Monken to Cleveland makes Judkins a really good volume bet, but maybe not the rest of the offense. And Harbaugh with Nagy going to the Giants makes Dart and Scatterboo more interesting because their fantasy profile already had legs and they're bringing stability. These are the paths for winning leagues. Our third chapter looks at offensive lines. We need to stop treating one number like it's a magic wand, because offensive line data is useful, and fantasy managers often use it the same way a toddler uses cutlery. They grab one number, and they kind of wave around, they get sauce and spaghetti everywhere, and we all wonder why dinner went badly. So, pass blocking and run blocking are not the same thing. They help different players in different ways. A good pass blocking line will give your quarterback time, gives them access to deeper concepts, gives receivers time to separate. The longer they're one-on-one with the corner, the more likely they are to win. It allows tight ends to get into routes instead of staying attached as emergency bodyguards, and it lets an offense stay efficient, especially on third down, and can protect a scoring drive that may have stalled. Good run blocking, that creates yards before contact. It keeps an offense on schedule. It helps backs survive volume. It creates efficiency in the red zone. It lets teams play from ahead and avoid asking the quarterback to have to throw 52 times while being chased by 300-pound wolves. The best fantasy environments will often have both, and Taylor has gone into a lot of depth on this. We've shared all sorts of information around which teams have strengths where. Denver is the gold standard. We talked about already that the Broncos rank first in pass blocking grade, third in run blocking grade per Pro Football Focus. That's massive. I mean, it helps Bo Nix. It helps their running game. It helps their entire offensive floor. If you want a young quarterback with a chance to take a step without needing to become Superman, Denver is exactly the kind of environment you want. He doesn't need to be Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. He runs enough. He throws efficiently enough. And this lets the line keep the offense out of the ditch. Now, that's how fantasy seasons that are successful get built. Not always through the fireworks. Sometimes through just very boring bridge that never collapses. I think one that people haven't talked about enough is Carolina. They currently sit 4th in pass blocking and 7th in run blocking. Doesn't make every Panther an automatic smash, but it does tell you that the environment may be less hostile than we've experienced in past years. Teteroa McMillan is currently projecting for around 140 targets and a 27% target share. That looks more interesting when the line gives the offense a chance to breathe. It's also why I like Jalen Coker at his ADP. He's far cheaper, and I expect will eat a very similar size pie to what Teteroa McMillan eventually produces. And it means I love Chuba Hubbard too. But we've always loved Chuba Hubbard on this podcast. Philadelphia remains strong in both areas too. They're 6th in pass blocking, 8th in run blocking. And that matters to Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Devonta Smith, and really the overall scoring structure. Even if the offense style has shifted a bit and A.J. Brown's out of town, the foundation remains sturdy. Dallas is a bit more split, but useful. The Cowboys are 19th in pass blocking and 10th in run blocking. So not perfect in either lone profile, but it supports the idea that Javonte Williams matters because the role is real. He's one of the rare running backs with 10 rushing touchdowns last year, but also fits with the broader Dallas fantasy ecosystem. CeeDee Lamb is elite. No argument. George Pickens, though, also projects to be around a top 15 wide receiver. And Javonte, we've talked about how he remains high-end running back in 2026. It's an offense that the market expects to create multiple useful pieces. And I'm very interested when an offense gives me multiple doors to fantasy points. But now we want to talk about the mismatches. Pittsburgh are 7th in pass blocking, but 25th in run blocking. It tells me I'd rather chase passing game pieces than force myself into the backfield. And while DK Metcalf is ranked around wide receiver 30, because the overall offense is not screaming elite, the passing protection supports the idea that he can be useful, especially because there's going to be target volume. I'd stay away from the running game, though. New Orleans is even more extreme. The Saints are 8th in pass blocking and dead last in run blocking. If you listen carefully now, you can hear Taylor off in the distance singing this right now in his support of Tyler Shuck. I mean, this is a giant neon sign that says the passing game may be more functional than people expect, while the rushing efficiency could feel like dragging a couch through wet cement. Look, to me, this matters for Chris Olave. He's currently projected for 142 targets, 90 catches, 11 to 1,200 yards, 6 touchdowns. I think it also matters for Juwan Johnson. He's a great late tight end if you want to take that angle. The Saints are going to be unlikely to be able to run consistently and will have to use short to intermediate passing to substitute for that run game inefficiency. So pass catches here will be able to survive the ugliness of the imbalance in this offense. I also think this benefits Travis Etienne. Etienne behind the league's worst run blocking grade should concern people. You can't just wave that away because, well, I love Travis Etienne. This is no motivational poster. It's fantasy football, and the bodies in front of him do matter. But bad run blocking does not automatically kill Travis Etienne. It just changes his path because Etienne has shown over his career he has a path to getting volume through receiving work. The negative game scripts and the Saints using short passing to compensate for the poorness of the run game means that he may spend a lot of weekends getting mugged at the line of scrimmage, but he does project with a 60% carry share. The important bit is that he also projects for an 11% target share. I think that keeps him alive because his price seems to be staying reasonable. The entire point of the doctrine is not that I'm going to call some players good or bad. I'm not doing that. I just want to know how. How does Etienne score? How does Judkins survive? How does Scatterboo beat his cost? How does Chase Brown overcome Cincinnati's terrible line? How does James Cook turn Buffalo's scoring environment into touchdowns? Washington is top 10 in pass blocking and 31st in run blocking. As a Jaden Daniels note more than anything because it helps the passing case that he's got this great pass blocking line in front of him. But Daniels may also still need to create with his legs because the traditional run game may not carry the offense. For the backs, just be careful. But for Daniels, it really only to me strengthens the idea that he is that offense's escape hatch. Now, let's turn this around. The Rams, they are first in run blocking. They're 23rd in pass blocking. Just tells me Kyren Williams is if the rushing environment looks cleaner than Matt Stafford's protection environment. I'm all in on Kyren Williams. But it doesn't kill me on Puka. Puka's role is too good. He's really shifty. He can win quickly. He can be schemed touches. And he can survive pressure better than the slower developing outside receivers. I also think Devontae Adams in the red zone was probably Taylor's best call all of last year. And I can't see well where that changes. What it does remind us is that not every good offense is good in the same way. San Francisco are second in run blocking and 29th in pass blocking. Again, the obvious fantasy translation here is that the run game will be the engine, but the passing game may need timing, rhythm, yards after the catch. I mean, Brock Purdy can still be good. George Kittle can still be efficient if he's healthy. The receivers can still make plays, although they've also had their injury question marks and they've turned a lot of them over this year. But the line profile says this is cleaner for the backs than for long developing pass concepts. Detroit also really high in run blocking, 4th, but they're 27th in pass blocking. It's fascinating because Jahmyr Gibbs is exactly the kind of player who can turn that situation into gold. He projects as the type who could finish running back 1 overall. We expect him to have 283 carries, 70 catches, maybe close to 2,000 scrimmage yards, and 18 total touchdowns because you can just do it both ways. David Montgomery is in Houston. The Lions may still throw efficiently because of Jared Goff, and the system can win with timing, but the line tells us the rushing foundation is the more likely fantasy path. Indianapolis also pretty high up in rushing. They were 5th in run blocking, but 30th in pass blocking. This might be a Jonathan Taylor argument, but it also strengthens what I think is the case for Dan Jones, who's currently quarterback 25. It just makes it more interesting than people want to admit. A quarterback who can run behind a top 5 run blocking line. He doesn't only have to win from the pocket. He's got more ways to survive. Briefly mentioned Cincinnati before, and this is why. Because this is where they match in the wrong way. They are bottom 5 in pass blocking and bottom 3 in run blocking. I mean, gross. That profile is not a red flag. It's a factory of red flags. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown are all good enough to matter still. Talent can overcome some of that friction, but let's just acknowledge the friction still exists and will remain. Jamar Chase is going to project for 170 plus targets, 120 catches, 1,500 plus yards, 11 touchdowns, I think might be unders. It's too much volume to ignore, and we know that T. Higgins can still eat even though Jamar Chase is feasting, and is still a top 20 wide receiver every season. Joe Burrow is projected for over 4,000 yards and 30 plus passing touchdowns, but Chase Brown remains useful because good players attached to elite scoring environments can fit even through bad offensive line play. Every Bengal pick needs to be made with your eyes open. You're not buying a clean environment. You're just buying elite talent that has warning lights on their dashboard. So the offensive line rule is simple. You've got to split the number. Pass blocking will help quarterbacks, receivers, and those route-catching tight ends. Run blocking is going to help running backs, rushing quarterbacks, and red zone efficiency. Both together can create the fantasy environments we really should attack. One without the other tells us we need to be selective. Don't just ask whether the line is good. Ask what it's good at. My fourth chapter is about running backs. Volume is still king, but context will decide how much tax you pay. Running back analysis has always become a fight between two people who are wrong in opposite directions. One person is worshipping at the altar of talent, and the other is worshipping at the altar of volume. And both matter, but neither alone is exactly enough. Talent without touches is like having decorative candles because they look nice and they smell good, but they'll never heat your house. And volume without context might become 19 for 53 and picking up scraps like a bin chicken down at a truck stop. The best running back profiles give you both. They give you the volume, they give you efficiency. They give you carries and receptions. They give you touchdown access and survival no matter the game script. Jahmyr Gibbs clearly is a great example of this. Almost 300 carries for this year and 70 catches. We project close to 2,000 yards of scrimmage efficiency, and then also 18 total touchdowns. It's not a running back. That guy he's like a power station for a whole city. Bijan Robinson is not terribly different. 286 carries, 76 catches, 2,000 scrimmage yards, 12 total touchdowns. That may be unders too. Again, the key is not just that he's talented. He's got volume. He's got the combination. He can win when Atlanta leads. He can win when Atlanta trails. It can be 34-7 or 7-34. He's staying on the field. He can score on the ground. He can catch passes. He's not disappearing because the game script changes. This is the kind of player that is first round standard. Draft profit often lives below those obvious names. Those obvious names, you need them to return the value that you've invested in their high pick. The ones who can overproduce based on their pick, we've talked about a couple, are guys like Quinshon Judkins. Cleveland is not a pretty offense, and I don't think anyone should pretend they are. The offensive line is poor in the run game. The scoring environment may require a grief counselor. One early market snapshot had him ranked outside the top 50 as their best player, and yet the volume matters. That 74% carry share and over 300 touches, almost 350 this year, matters to me. It's the kind of workload fantasy managers should not ignore just because the team logo doesn't make you feel warm inside. My Judkins case is not built on sparkle. Those numbers are proof. Last year, he handled serious weekly carry volume. This year, his projection says that volume is just likely to grow. If your draft room is allergic to Cleveland, there's your buying window. The right way to draft Judkins is not to pretend the Browns are great. It's just to accept that they may be ugly and understand that 300 plus carries is going to have fantasy gravity, and that I think he's going to be what they trust in the red zone. Sometimes fantasy value is sitting in a glamorous offense with red zone fireworks, but sometimes it's sitting in Cleveland in a high-vis vest asking for just one more carry coach. We talked a little bit about Cam Scatterbo too, because he's a different kind of bet. His 2025 fantasy sample was half a season, but the fantasy points were loud. In 8 games, he showed that his points per game juice, access to touchdowns, and receiving usefulness are all just standard. This year, that projection gives him almost 60% of the carries and enough passing involvement to matter. And the Giants' run blocking grade is not elite. They sit 24th, and it matters, but this is where the coaching and role come in. The Giants become more physical with Harbaugh and Nagy, and that gives Scatterbo more meaningful work. He does not need to be behind a perfect line to beat his cost. He just needs volume and enough scoring chances, and we know they exist. This is why he fit my love list too. It's not about chasing the prettiest profile. It was about buying backs who've already shown they can turn the work into points. We mentioned Travis Etienne briefly. They've got the worst run blocking grade in the league down in New Orleans, and it's a problem. So if you draft Etienne expecting wide lanes and efficient running, then you're probably drafting a story that the data does not really support. Bad run blocking isn't going to kill him. It just changes his path. Let's look at Etienne as the receiving back in negative game scripts. 60% carry share, but 11% total target share behind an 8th ranked offensive line. I think this keeps him alive, and the price looks like it will remain reasonable. He's the kind of guy who's been drafted outside the top 20 that I think by the end of the year, we're going to be looking back going, of course he's a top 20 back. Again, it's the path, not the poster. Draft the path. Chase Brown is kind of on the other end. The talent and role, like, they're appealing. The line is a mess. 28th in pass blocking, 30th in run blocking. But the offense has the elite scoring potential, and it means that Chase Brown shouldn't be avoided. You just got to be highly sensitive about the pick. You can draft him. You just can't draft him like his plumbing's 100% clean. He's going to disappoint you sometimes. James Cook is on the other side of the coin. The room may not want to fully respect him because Josh Allen dominates all the fantasy conversation like a drunk uncle with a microphone at a wedding. But 300 carries in that offense, 1,400 yards, 13 combined touchdowns. These projections aren't some side piece. It's a major fantasy asset, and the Bills' run blocking grades at 12th. Not elite, but strong enough, and the offense will score. Allen will stress defenses, and Cook doesn't need to be the whole meal. He just needs to keep eating while everyone else is worried about what Josh Allen's doing, and he does. This is how good fantasy picks hide in plain sight. So our 2026 running back rule is that volume is still king, but context decides the tax. Great volume in a great offense, pay up. Great volume in an ugly offense, buy that at the discount. Fragile volume in a bad line environment, maybe let someone else light that candle. Receiving volume, well, that's kind of like armor. And goal line work, treat it like gold. The mistake is not drafting risky running backs. The mistake is paying safe player prices for people who are risky. I'm going to move to chapter 5 here because wide receivers and tight ends are so interesting. The talent will get you invited, but the ecosystem's what pays. Wide receiver is a position I used to play when I played gridiron. I've got my pads behind me now, still in their jersey. My favorite position, and it's where fantasy managers like me have lied to myself in the most beautiful way in years gone by. I love talent. I love highlights. We all do. We love players who look like they were built in a lab by someone who thinks shoulder pads should come with smoke machines. And I reckon let's get that invented. Let's make it happen. But wide receiver scoring is part of a supply chain. It goes quarterback, protection, participating in routes, target share, offensive pace, red zone design, game script, competition for targets. So just being talented gets you there, but you need to understand the entire ecosystem. Jamar Chase is still the most elite receiver example because that target projection is just mental. 170 plus targets, 120 catches, 1,500 yards, touchdowns for days. The line worries in Cincinnati are real. We've talked about that, but Chase is not a normal player. He's the offense's pressure release. He can be explosive as an element in the touchdown area. He can also just get you the 3-yard catch to keep a drive going. It's the kind of volume that survives the terrible, terrible friction. You don't need to squint for Jamar Chase. You just need to decide whether you can stomach that the Bengals line is being held together with duct tape and dreams, and also Joe Burrow's private health insurance. Puka Nacua is kind of similar. We touched on him briefly too. The Rams' pass blocking grade is not exciting, but Puka's role is so good. He is projecting for 170 plus targets, 120 catches, almost 1,600 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. He's not a player who needs everything to be perfect. That is a player who the offense actively bends around. CeeDee Lamb is another obvious elite play, and I actually think George Pickens is the more interesting player in this offense. Even though he's not the one receiver, he's projected for 125 targets and 80 catches, over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. It puts him inside the top 15 territory in one projection set that I saw. The market snapshot in Dallas with 3 players inside the top 30 overall as well makes me feel happy. Lamb, Pickens, and Javonte Williams. I think that matters because Pickens might be volatile. He's always carried a bit of a will win you a week, but will also make you stare through a freaking wall. But volatility attached to a projected top 15 receiver role in a strong fantasy ecosystem is not something to fear automatically. It's just something to make sure you price adequately. This is where some fantasy managers need to stop acting like volatility is always bad. Volatility at a discount is where upside is born. Volatility at a premium is where stress is born. So Pickens' appeal depends on where the room lets you buy him. If people are still treating him like an emotional support grenade, I'm interested if they're playing keepings off. But if he's going early, let it be someone else's problem. Chris Olave is another receiver I keep coming back to. And Taylor, again, you can probably hear him in the background. He was moister than an oyster for Chris Olave in the past. I imagine that returns. 142 targets, 90 catches, over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns in his projection profile this year. But check this out, 26% target share. That's a real role. The offense may not be pretty, but the fantasy points don't care if you're wearing a tuxedo or if you're covered in bin juice. The same logic is going to help Juwan Johnson as a late tight end. The Saints aren't going to run efficiently. Those short and intermediate routes in the passing game will have to do more of the heavy lifting. And it just gives a guy who already has 100 targets a season a repeated path to usable weeks. Now, the one guy teams. Minnesota and Miami both have standouts as fragile ecosystems in early market snapshots, and I think it just makes guys like Justin Jefferson and Devon Achane, who are outstanding players, no one's going to argue against that, problems because they've got structural dependency issues in their team. Jefferson is elite. He projects for over 160 targets, over 100 catches, around 1,400 receiving yards and strong weekly volume, but one market view has a huge gap between Jefferson and the next Viking. Like, the next name's not even in the top 100. It doesn't make Jefferson bad. It just kind of makes him the most expensive piece in that fragile environment. I mean, he can overcome it because he's brilliant and he has beaten imperfect environments before. But if you draft him like nothing around him matters and he's just going to turn up and continue to produce at an elite level, you're not drafting, you're kind of worshipping at that altar of brand equity. I think Achane is similar, although because of his touches, it's a different situation. His ceiling can be terrifying. Anytime I'm against a team that has him in the lineup, I just am terrified because he can score from everywhere and he's electric in the way that makes defenders look like they just completely forgot the tutorial. But what saves this from the complete terror is that Miami's line profile is ugly. 31st in pass blocking, 28th in run blocking. The market sees him as the one obvious Dolphin, but there's a huge gap between him and the next Miami option. I mean, it doesn't make Achane a bad pick. He's going to have the volume, but it just makes him a risk management questions like we had with Judkins. If he goes at a full ceiling price, you need the health, efficiency, and role all to keep singing at the same time in constant harmony, no breaks. It's possible, but I mean, he's not cheap. Tight end actually is its own little house of horrors. There's only a few tight ends who truly change the shape of your team, and we know their names. Trey McBride, projecting for 1 million targets, 150. 1 million catches, over 100 again. Over 1,000 yards, too, and 6 touchdowns. I expect he'll score more touchdowns than that. This isn't a tight end projection. This is a wide receiver with a case of mistaken identity, which allows you to start him in a more powerful roster spot. Brock Bowers was the other monster. We've talked about how he's projected for almost 100 catches and 1,000 yards, bunch of touchdowns, and QBR's a rival at the Raiders, and their need for his structure makes Bowers one of the sharper positional advantages. After that, the board's just becoming more philosophical. It's the polite way of saying when people start that annual game of just throwing blindfolded darts in the dark. Colston Loveland is super talented, and I love Tucker Kraft. He's useful. Tyler Warren is one of the more exciting tight ends to me, and Harold Fannin Jr. has really shown he matters in that offense. But the price is going to be everything. Loveland currently projects as tight end 4, and I think that's kind of fun. People are paying for him as though there has been a full breakout already banked. And to me, that's just kind of dangerous. Tucker Kraft can be good, though I think he's still a little overpriced. I mean, at tight end, the rule is really brutal. You are either buying nuclear usage at the top or you're waiting, because McBride and Bowers can bury opponents. But everyone else has to be priced like there's still, work to prove. And that middle tier is, you can find a gem, but it's also where hope goes often to die. It's expensive uncertainty wearing a nicer shirt there sometimes because it feels safe and it's not. Guys like Jake Ferguson, Juwan Johnson, Dallas Goddard, Kyle Pitts, Dalton Schultz, even old man Travis Kelce fall into a sensible range, then you can draft them because they're all useful. They all get routes. They all have, target paths. They all have access to touchdowns. Just as long as you're not paying a premium price for all those maybes. Fantasy drafts are already full of enough emotional damage by week 1. My 6th chapter is about the draft board. Overrated, underrated, and a bunch of kind of final rules. Because this is where we get to an uncomfortable bit. Players can be great, but still overrated. And the sentence saying that annoys people because fantasy managers love turning every take someone has into some moral trial. If you say a player is overpriced, people leave thinking you've just said, oh, he stinks. No, it's not how it works. A player can be brilliant, but still a bad buy. That, exquisite mansion on the Malibu beach might be overpriced at $15 million, but it doesn't make it a shit house. McCaffrey is still great. And that part's annoying because it would be easy to call him overrated if he was secretly cooked, but we've seen he's not. Like, the problems of age, workload, fragility, and cost exist. And if the draft room draft him like last year's ceiling is simply just repeatable, then I'm happy to let someone else take on that risk. I don't need to be the bloke paying full price for a sports car that then has 400,000 kilometers on it just because it still looks sexy in my driveway. So McCaffrey, he's going as running back 3 or 4. I'm pretty happy to just let others take him there. But if he falls a little further, I'll sniff that up. Justin Jefferson is not overrated as a player, but as a fantasy bet this year, we talked about his ecosystem. I just don't think you can look at him as a top 2 or 3 receiver anymore. And we saw how fragile it is last year. If the price assumes Minnesota's offensive uncertainty doesn't matter, it makes me uncomfortable. I mean, he could beat it. He's good enough. I don't want to spend a premium pick on a player who might need to drag a whole offense along uphill every week while everyone else is clinging onto his back, desperate to make sure they don't fall off. Devon Chain, we spoke about being another terrifying price problem because his ceiling is obvious. The line context and ecosystem concentration are the concerns here. And Miami's offensive line just grades poorly in both facets. The fantasy market has him separated from the rest of the team by a chasm. If he goes at full ceiling costs, there's not much room for him to deliver anything above it. Through the whole chaos of an NFL season, I'm pretty happy to let someone take him as running back 5. Chain can win you a league. He can also make you feel like you just bought a Chinese meal in one of those plastic containers on top of the Bay Marie at 4 o'clock in a food court. It's a fair risk you may shit yourself later. DK Metcalf is also fine at the right price and dangerous at the wrong one. Pittsburgh passing grade, that really helps. Their offensive line is fine at pass blocking, but the broader fantasy environment is not overflowing with obvious top-end production. And currently, he's discounted. He's like wide receiver 30, and I'm interested. If he climbs much higher than that, well, man, I'm going to start checking the exits. Colson Loveland, I've just brought him up really quickly before, but he's, to me, the classic tight end trap. He's young, he's talented, he's exciting, and he's priced like he's had a full season-long breakout. He played a nice month last year. Taylor loves him. And, I mean, also to me, that's enough to hit the escape hatch. But he's got such a teeny tiny sample size of it. I'm going to let somebody else pay that price to do the learning, and I'll come back next year. Tucker Kraft is kind of similar too, because I love the player. It's hard for Aussies not to like a team who wear green and gold a little bit. But let's question the cost. Given his high touchdown rate on so few targets last year and Green Bay's awful pass blocking rating, it's a little tough to just go straight back to the well and expect that he's still going to be a player who, when he went injured last year onto IR, he was tight end 2. I'm not expecting that again, and I'm certainly not going to buy him like I expect that efficiency. Now, players who are underrated. We talked about Drake May. He's a quarterback Taylor has said he wants to be early on. The projection gives him passing volume and rushing value. It's exactly the combination that will win a fantasy league. And I've warmed to him significantly from where I first started. Bo Nix is not going to make your draft room gasp. Oh, how good is that? Let everyone else chase the fireworks. Denver's offensive line environment is outstanding, and Nix has got enough rushing contribution to beat less stable names. Jackson Dart's volatility is kind of wild, but his rushing volatility is useful volatility. Passing profile still needs work, but the fantasy profile has suggested he's got legs, literally, and he's using them. Daniel Jones, to me, is the cheapest dual threat bet. People are just going to mock because the football aesthetics aren't always pretty, but he is, for me, the first player I'd like to take as a bargain quarterback too. Or if you miss everybody, you've waited so long, just take him with your last pick. Fantasy's not grading aesthetics because this guy, he starts, runs, and gets enough competence around him. He's going to matter again. He was killing it in points per game last year behind a fifth-graded offensive line for rushing. George Pickens is, again, a favourite wide receiver. The projections say that the role is real, the ecosystem is strong, and the volatility may scare others off. Olave is a great situation bet because that great pass blocking and that terrible run blocking, strong target projection is a recipe for ugly but useful fantasy points. Juwan Johnson in the same room for similar reasons. Quinton Judkins is all about the volume in an ugly room. It's not always fun, but fantasy value is not always found in pretty places, and sometimes it's in Cleveland, sitting on a lunch pail. Cam Scatterbo comes with, he has a bit of risk. He's not completely free of it, but he's already shown he can turn touches into points, and the Giants are getting more functional. He'll beat that cost. Travis Etienne's only underrated because people are worried about the run blocking. It's not his only avenue to points. The receiving role sticks, and he matters. This is the final lesson, and it's why I keep coming back to the word doctrine. This isn't a manifesto. It's not a prophecy. It's not commandments from the mountain chiseled into stone, though I'll absolutely accept a dramatic wind machine if one's available. Doctrine is simpler than that. It's a set of rules you use when a draft room gets loud, ADP starts whispering nonsense, and someone takes a player 2 rounds early because he just feels due, man. This is the stuff I want written on the wall before I'm on the clock. Chapter 7. This is my doctrine by rounds. When to be safe and when to start swinging. Because the draft is not one long decision. It's a series of different games wearing the same hat. The first 3 rounds aren't the same as rounds 10 to 14, and they should not feel the same. They shouldn't be judged the same. They should not be attacked with that same level of abandon. You don't walk in round 1 trying to be the smartest bloke in the room. It's how you become the funniest bloke in the group chat, though, so buoy to you. You don't walk into round 12 trying to be safe either, because that's how you end up rostering a player whose best case scenario is 7 to 8 points in an early bedtime. The doctrine changes by the stages of the draft. Same principles, different aggression levels. So rounds 1 to 3, don't get cute, hero. I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it until someone has it printed on a novelty mug and hits a whole draft room over the head with it. You cannot win your league in the first round, but you can absolutely lose it. It's not just a cute line. This is draft survival. The first 3 rounds are not where I'm trying to prove that I've seen deeper into the universe than anybody else. It's not the place to draft the player who needs 6 things to go right, 3 teammates to get injured, a coordinator to discover fire, and a quarterback to suddenly become accurate like nobody's business. No. Rounds 1 to 3 are where I want the cleanest profiles on the board. Honest, safe, reliable, bankable. As close to guaranteed production as fantasy football will allow before it throws a hamstring injury into your Sunday and laughs at you. This is where I want players with a narrow set of season-long range of outcomes. It doesn't mean boring. Jamar Chase isn't boring. Bijan Robinson, Jameer Gibbs, Josh Allen, Puka, they're not boring. They're premium picks because their paths to points are obvious. That's a lot of P's. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Volume, targets, rushing production, touchdowns, offensive ecosystem, and weekly role. The early round should not require a courtroom argument. If I have to spend 5 minutes explaining why my second round pick can work, I probably have picked the wrong guy. This is where the doctrine gets conservative, but not scared. I don't need to win the draft on the first lap. I need to avoid crashing into a wall because I'm too busy waving at the freaking crowd. So my doctrine for rounds 1 to 3. Rounds 1 to 3 are for players with clean paths and narrow season-long risk. Don't get cute. Cute will get you buried. Rounds 4 to 6 are where you build the muscle of your team. By the time you hit round 4, your roster probably is a pair of running backs and a wide receiver, pair of wide receivers and a running back. Maybe you went a little different. Maybe you grabbed one of the top shelf tight ends, or maybe you paid for a top shelf quarterback. So then all of a sudden you might have running back, wide receiver, tight end, or pair of running backs or wide receivers with a tight end. You might have done the same thing with quarterback, have a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, or paired up at one of the positions and taken a quarterback with it. All that's fine because draft rooms are weird and value presents where value presents. ADPs fall over, someone panics, someone drafts a name because they liked his documentary. Someone takes a quarterback early because they want the emotional security and a weighted blanket. Fine. Whatever you build, the point is 4 to 6 are still mostly about running backs and wide receivers. It's where people start getting tempted by shiny detours because of a quarterback they recognize, or a tight end with a breakout case, or a player who feels safe, a veteran who always finds a way, or, there's a really cool camp quote going around a player and it kind of acts as cologne. I'm not saying you can never draft a quarterback or a tight end here. If value falls, value falls. If the board gives you a premium positional edge at a discount, don't be stubborn for the sake of sounding tough. But in most drafts, these rounds are where I want to build my weekly engine. More running backs, more wide receivers, more players who can live in my starting lineup. More players with real target shares, real carry shares, real roles, real paths to points. This is where I'm still drafting players who can become weekly starters and not just nice depth. That's for later. Because once the draft gets later, certainty starts to leave the building. But rounds 4 to 6 are your last proper chance to stack strong fantasy profiles before the player pool starts turning into a tray of leftovers under a heat lamp. This is also where offensive line and ecosystem context matter the most. If I'm choosing between similar running backs, give me the one with the better line. Give me the better offense. Give me the one with the stronger receiving role. If I'm choosing between similar receivers, give me the one with the more effective quarterback, or the clearer target path, or the more concentrated ecosystem, where they're not just the best player and the second best player in his offense is a chasm away. Rounds 4 to 6, they're not about being reckless. They're about building the muscle. So my doctrine for rounds 4 to 6, they're where you keep hammering running back and wide receiver unless a genuine positional edge falls in your lap. Build the engine before you attach a spoiler. Now, rounds 7 to 9. I don't mind talking depth, quarterbacks and tight ends, all the start of the fun. Because by round 7, your core should mostly exist. Through 6 rounds, you probably have got at least a couple of good starting running backs, a couple of good starting wide receivers, and a flex. Ideally, I probably only filled a flex, but maybe also found a super strong bench player who could become a starter if the season breaks the right way. It means that rounds 7 to 9 are where your drafts will start to change shape. And it's where a lot of your league will start looking to the onesie positions, quarterback and tight end. This is where everyone who didn't draft the early tight ends is starting to look into that pool like it owes them money. This is where people start asking themselves whether they're comfortable leaving the draft without like a name at a position as well. This is where I want everyone to stay calm. If I've ignored quarterback to this point, and generally that's my strategy, this is where I'm very happy to start shopping, but not with desperation. Not with my shirt over my head, but with intent. This is the zone where those rushing quarterback bets become very attractive. And these guys are all still sitting there. Bo Nix, Jackson Dart, Trevor Lawrence. Depending on your draft room, Caleb Williams may even still be there. Dan Jones will definitely still be there. Any quarterback whose legs give me that escape hatch we talked about. This is exactly where this doctrine creates your profit. Because half the room is still drafting quarterbacks based on name comfort. I'm drafting for fantasy scoring shape. At tight end, this is also where the board can get pretty interesting because McBride and Bowers are long gone, and I'm not trying to pretend every mid-tier tight end is, secretly elite. I just want target paths. I want route involvements. I want touchdown access. I want a reason this player matters. Like Jake Ferguson, Juwan Johnson, they all had over 100 targets last year. So did Kyle Pitts, Dalton Schultz. Dallas Goedert had less, but his touchdown efficiency was mad. And without A.J. Brown, he's likely to be a red zone target. These guys can make sense depending on their cost, and you need to understand their role. I don't want to draft a tight end just because I feel naked without one. Feeling naked is not analyzing your draft. It's just your brain panicking because the roster grid has that empty square and you feel nervous about it. Round 7 and 9 are also where depth starts to become powerful. This is where I want running backs and receivers who are not just bench decorations, but players I could actually use. A bench player should either be startable in the right matchup or have a path to becoming much more valuable if one thing changes. The best thing I can say about a player is, hey, he might score 8 sometimes, then I'm not taking him because that's not depth. That's roster lint. So my doctrine in rounds 7 to 9, this is where you'll field your quarterback and tight end generally, if the value lines up, but the mission is still upside depth. Don't draft empty calories just because your roster has the empty slot. Rounds 10 to 14. And depending on the length of your draft, 15 and 16 too. Start drafting trouble. Floor, you've already been drafting for floor. By this point, your offensive starting lineup should be mostly built. So you might be waiting on one of the onesie positions still at this point, and that's fine. You may have punted tight end completely and you're prepared to live under a bridge like a goblin waiting for one. Also fine. Like, I respect the lifestyle and no judgment from me. But for most parts, rounds 10 plus are your opportunity to exercise your knowledge and go for the sleeper. Your dart throw, your flyer, your chaos bet. Players who make your draft room go, really? Players who might be dropped by week 3, but who also might be the reason you look insufferably smug through October. This is where people make one of the biggest mistakes I see every year for 20 years in fantasy. They just draft safe bench players. I'm like, I hate that. Safe bench players are usually useless bench players who've just got a better press agent. If a player is not going to start for me most weeks, I don't need him to have a tidy little 6-point floor. I need him to have a reason to become dangerous. This comes back to range of outcomes. Every player I roster needs to have one or two things. They need to have the high floor across the whole season, or they have to have a player who can become an elite option in any given week if the right opportunity appears. So rounds 1 to 3 are mostly about the first group, right? Narrow season-long outcomes, stable production. I want to avoid lighting my premium picks on fire and having a smoke ceremony. But weeks 10 plus are about the second group, weekly ceiling. It's a season-long game, fantasy. I understand. You want to be winning games all the time. But it's a weekly game. I know it sounds obvious, but it gets overlooked constantly. You're not setting a lineup in August and then just like you've planted a tree and you just watch it grow without being touched all season long. Every week you look at your roster. Every week you look at the free agent pool, injuries, matchups, roles, game environments, and you decide who can help you win that 1 week against that one opponent. That means your bench should not be filled with players who are permanently fine. Fine is office coffee. I want players who can spike. The backup running back who's 1 injury away from 18 touches. The rookie wide receiver you got for almost free, whose role could just grow. The deep threat who could win a week in the right matchup with a bad secondary. Pass catching back who may just become chaos because the team may fall behind. The tight end who attached to a passing environment that all of a sudden may just need to condense. A rushing quarterback who could turn into a weekly starter if the job fully clicks. That's what these rounds are for. Not safe, not steady, not, oh, I've heard of him. You are drafting bench players for your fantasy roster, but you want to draft players with a reason to matter. Because here's the truth. Most of your late round picks aren't going to survive your roster this season. They'll be sacrificed to the waiver wire like tiny little fantasy offerings. And that's normal. That's healthy. It's the circle of life. But, with more injury designations. So don't waste those picks trying to protect yourself from small weekly losses. Use them to chase the big weekly win. So my doctrine for rounds 10 plus, they're not for safe bench furniture. They're for players who become a real problem, draft trouble. And that's Maddie's 2026 Fantasy Draft Doctrine. It's proof over hype. It's paths over names. It's profit over comfort. Early in drafts, I want safety. Middle of drafts, I want structure. Later in drafts, I want chaos and ceilings. Rounds 1 to 3, just avoid losing your league. 4 to 6, get your muscle on. 7 to 9, you can fill your gaps there. Don't panic. And 10 plus, floor is gone. Go for ceilings. I'm not trying to draft the prettiest roster for August. I'm trying to draft a roster that has legs that will work in November. Give me quarterbacks who've got that rushing escape hatch. Give me running backs who've got the real workload. Give me receivers who are attached to actual ecosystems. Give me tight ends who we know have the target to paths and we're not just dreaming them up. Give me coaches where I can see the receipts. Give me offensive lines that tell me how the points are going to arrive. But most of all, give me prices that leave me room for profit. Because the draft room will always sell you names. Names are easy. Names are comfortable. Names make you feel safe while you slowly build a roster out of fog and grandpa's old memories. I want paths. Paths to volumes. Path to rushing. Targets. Touchdowns. Paths through a good line or around a bad one. Everyone else can draft on vibes. I'm bringing the doctrine. And that's it. It's a big one. Thank you so much for sticking with me. This article is available on Substack right now. If you haven't subscribed to Substack, do it now. These arrive in your email straight away as soon as they're published. And this one particularly may be a really good resource to keep going back to, or a podcast you might want to download and just keep ready, because each of these little chapters may give you the opportunity to learn a little, give you new perspective. Again, I'm not telling you how to draft your team, and I feel like I wasn't going round by round trying to tell you where to buy who, but really just to give you information to help you make decisions that will make you feel good about what you do draft. Because everybody approaches these things differently, and every draft can present itself to you differently. Good luck out there in the 2026 fantasy preseason. Looking forward to doing many a mock draft ourselves, and we are well into ranking season as well. So make sure you catch up with Taylor and I. We'll be going weekly again from the start of August. Can't wait. In the meantime, hooroo.
SuperCoach Halfa, get your edge, get it faster. Taylor leads, Maddie's laughter. NFL SuperCoach Halfa, NFL SuperCoach Halfa, get your edge.